The largest number by far for the week of June 8th was Pennsylvania, with a whopping almost 111,000 people registering to vote, and over 8,000 of them were not in the database, and 78 of those people were deceased.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovich, and we are Unapologetically Outspoken. Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. So last week, Stephanie found a very interesting clip on TikTok related to some recent trends in voter registration on the U.S. government Social Security Administration website. And we're going to dive into the details of that today. But before we do, let's listen to this clip, Stephanie.
All right, here we go.
Tell me what the fuck is going on with the voter rolls in Texas. Like, I'm sure there's an innocent explanation for this, but I can't think of one. So the numbers I'm about to show you come directly from the Social Security Administration. This isn't some crackpot conspiracy theory website. No, this is SSA.gov, and this is the Help America Vote verification. This page exists simply to show you the amount of people that are attempting to register to vote in every state. And it's broken down weekly. So I don't want to hear any bullshit that the numbers I'm about to show you have been falsified or that there's some right-wing conspiracy. The numbers I'm about to show you come directly from the Social Security Administration website. And here's how the numbers are broken down. You have total non-matches. That's the total number of verification requests where there is no match in our records for the name and the last four of the social. Then you have total matches. That's the total number of verification requests where there is at least one match in our records on the name and the last four of the social. And then you have single match alive. That's basically where you have the name and the last four and it matches somebody that's alive. Then you have single match deceased. And that's where the person matching that name and social trying to register to vote is no longer alive. So that's a really fun one. Because registering to vote isn't difficult, but I imagine it's really hard if you're dead. Regardless, you'd be amazed at the amount of dead people that try to register every week. But regardless, almost every week in the state of Texas, we are seeing nearly 250,000 people try to register to vote. That statistic by itself is pretty fucking wild. You had 227,000 people last week try to register to vote in Texas. Look, I understand Texas is a big state. In comparison, California, which has 25% more people than the state of Texas, only had 5,600 people try to register in the same time period. But it keeps happening in Texas and magically other battleground states like Pennsylvania and Arizona. And when we look at who is trying to register, it gets even weirder. Do you remember what these categories are? First block you're going to see is total non-matches, then total matches, then single match alive. And then, of course, we have the dead people trying to vote. So of the 227,000 people that tried to register to vote last week in Texas, in more than 30,000 of those registrations, the name and social did not match. Now, you had 196,000 that did match and were able to register. And then you had 192,000 where a single match was found alive. Then you also have the 4,571 dead people who tried to register to vote. And the craziest part is this is happening every week. If you go to any state where we're not really sure whether it's going to go Democrat or Republican in the next presidential election, every one of them has an insane amount of people trying to register to vote every fucking week, and also has a very good percentage of them where the name and social don't match or the name and the social match somebody who's dead. So
That's crazy, Tara, when I saw that, because in a single week for 4,500 dead people to register, there's something going on.
Yeah. And so if you guys didn't fully get that, this is called the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA. And it was established back in 2002. And the whole purpose was to require states to verify information of newly registered voters for federal elections. And initially, it was set up so the state would have to verify voter identity by confirming that their driver's license or ID matched with the state's motor vehicle administration. But then in 2004, they developed a new verification process called the HAVV, which is the Help America Vote Verification System. And that's for people who don't have an ID issued by the Motor Vehicle Administration. So instead, they're like, okay, you can have the state verify your social security number, the last four digits of the social, and the name and date of birth, because everyone's given a social security number. And basically every state in America uses this system except for North Dakota because they have no voter registration requirement at all. And then there's 5 states, New Mexico, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia, that use the full 9-digit social security number on all their voter registration applications. So they don't obtain verification through this system for registration, but the rest of the country is on the system. So when someone registers to vote in their state, the information will automatically go through their state system to the federal Social Security Administration database, where it then gets filtered into these categories that the guy was describing in the clip. And so just to reaffirm that, it's either no match, which means the person's not in the Social Security admin database, or it's a match. And if it is a match, then it's broken down into they're confirming the person is either alive or dead. And then sometimes it goes even further if there's several alive or dead people who have that same information in the database. And so sometimes I guess it matches with both a living person and a dead person at the same time. And all that does is show you how fucked up the Social Security Administration is. But when you go on the website, there's a drop-down menu and you can choose the week you want to look at. And as the guy in the video was saying, the numbers that show up in each category are for a 1-week time frame. And Stephanie, I don't know about you, but I completely agree that what this guy said about how fucking suspicious this is, because either I'm reading it wrong or there's some unknown explanation for why these mass numbers of people are voting in specific states each week. And he was talking about Texas, but I want to bring attention to something else. And so right now it looks like the database is about 2 weeks behind, because when I went to the drop-down menu, the most current week available was the week ending June 8th. But let's talk about the numbers for that week. So the total number of new voters throughout the country was 235,578. And that's in 1 week. And most of the states were ranging from a couple hundred to maybe 1,000 or 2,000 new registered voters. But then some states had astronomical numbers. For example, Arizona had 45,813 people registered to vote that week. And almost 8,500 of those were not in the system. Another state with a significant number of new voters during that same week was Missouri, which had over 22,000 people registered to vote, and 2,200 of them were not in the system. And 160 of them showed up as dead people. The largest number by far for the week of June 8th was Pennsylvania, with a whopping almost 111,000 people registering to vote. And over 8,000 of them were not in the database, and 78 of those people were deceased. Stephanie, these are fairly significant numbers of people registering to vote who don't have a state issue ID or a federally assigned social security number. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're a citizen of the United States, don't you get an assigned social security number at birth? So out of these 235,578 new voters during this 1 week, over 36,380 of them could not be identified. Don't you think this is weird? Maybe these could be illegal migrants being given ID cards.
Well, yeah, especially when we're talking about Texas and Arizona, where all these migrants are coming in. But yeah, isn't it weird that Arizona and Pennsylvania both have these statistical anomalies, and these are both swing states that were sued for voter fraud in the 2020 election? And I watched the hearing on both of them, and they both had testimony from analysts that said that there were statistical anomalies that were absolutely impossible. So it seems very suspicious. And yeah, like you said, these illegals are almost immediately given an ID card along with a voter registration form when they come over and sign up for their free money and housing and healthcare. And in 49 states, they are given voter registration forms to the illegal migrants without requiring proof of citizenship. And this is according to an article I found in the New York Post. The article states, quote, every state but Arizona, which recently passed a law barring the practice on state but not federal forms, gives applicants for either welfare benefits, driver's licenses, or in some cases, mail-in ballot voter registration forms without demanding proof of citizenship, end quote. So not only do migrants get voter registration forms when they're collecting their benefits, but there are also 19 states plus Washington, D.C. that allow illegal migrants to get a driver's license. So that gives them yet another opportunity to register to vote. Now, the way this is happening legally is they're saying, well, it isn't illegal to give a voter form to illegal migrants. But if the migrant claims to be a citizen and fills out the form and votes, well, that's illegal. So that's how they get away with this. And the article went on to say that the House Administration Committee last month approved the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or the SAVE Act. And it would require states to receive proof of citizenship when anyone registers to vote by mail at the DMV or at a welfare agency office. Rep. Chip Roy told the New York Post, quote, while Biden and radical progressive Democrats give ISIS and criminals an app to literally schedule their illegal entry, Republicans must fight any chance of illegal voter registration until we can mass deport, end quote. Now, this sounds great, right? But first of all, it has yet to go to a floor vote. And of course, the left is adamantly against it. So the Post quoted the left-leaning Campaign Legal Center, which opposes the SAVE Act, and they say that it's a shameful measure that will undermine trust in the electoral process, dismissing concerns over non-citizen voting and declaring it has not taken place at any meaningful level. Shameful bills like the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act often result in eligible U.S. citizens being incorrectly prevented from voting or being forced to jump through additional hoops to exercise their freedom to vote. Campaign Legal Center opposes this bill. Tara, this is it's such bullshit because here you have the left that they're constantly talking about voter suppression, just like that quote, yet you have more people that voted in 2020 than ever before. Biden supposedly got more votes than any president in history. So which is it? Is there voter suppression or did he get the most votes in history? Because both can't be true and everyone damn well knows it. And not to mention, before migrants even cross the border, you have these NGOs that are giving them flyers saying, don't forget when you get over there, vote for Biden so we can keep running and keep the border open. And I mean, we went over this in a past episode. It was an undercover journalist that exposed this because he was recording all these flyers. But it's so in your face. And it's so aggravating because when you call it out, you're the one that's the problem and you're the one that, should be locked up for denying elections. And it's just so ridiculous.
Yeah, people wouldn't be jumping through hoops to exercise their right to vote if all you have to do is follow the fucking law and use your. Oh, it just makes me so mad, this whole thing, because the whole voting system is such a shit show. But I want to talk some more about these numbers. But before I do, I want to call attention to an article that came out a couple days ago on Ipsos.com. And you mentioned swing states earlier, Stephanie, and that's what this pertains to. There was a recent swing state election survey taken this month. And the key swing states for this year's election are the same as they've typically been. It's Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada. So these states are the ones that are going to play a pivotal role in the election because they collectively represent 1/3 of the electoral votes needed to win the presidency.
Yeah, and I want to point out Minnesota really quick because we're talking about swing states, right? But a recent poll showed that Trump and Biden are even on Minnesota, which is always been a super blue state. So even the blue states are starting to turn red. I don't want to get off tangent, but I had to point that out. They're going to have it's getting too big to rig, okay? But speaking of the swing state of Georgia, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger tried to implement citizen verification methods earlier this year. And of course, he was sued by left-wing vote groups. And it's just like, why are they fighting so hard to not have verified voters and safe and secure elections?
Yeah,
You know?
that's the number one question. Exactly. And like, let's take a look at some of these recent numbers, right? So the three states with the biggest number of new registered voters in the database, the Social Security admin database for the past few weeks are Arizona, Missouri, and Pennsylvania. And so again, Arizona and Pennsylvania are both swing states, and you suddenly have massive numbers of people voting, right? I already read those numbers. But let's take a look at some of the other swing states and see if there's anything strange there. So in Georgia, you had over 7,050 people register to vote that same week of June 8th. And over 2,600 of them, which is a third of new voters, are not in the Social Security system. In Michigan, you had 266 new people registered to vote, but 106 of them were not in the system. That's like almost half. In North Carolina, you had 8,200 plus people registered to vote. And out of that 8,000, 3,459 of them, which again, almost half, were not in the system. And then in Nevada, over half of the people were also not in the system, with only 51 of the 121 new voters existing in the database. And again, that's for 1 week. So let's take a look at the trend of new voter numbers in swing states for the past few weeks, because a shit ton of people seem to be registering in a few select states in a very specific time period. So going back to the example of Pennsylvania, I already mentioned that just shy of 111,000 people registered to vote during the week of June 8th. Well, let's go back a week. The week of June 1st, there were 104,250 people registered to vote, and over 6,500 of those were not in the system. The previous week of May 25th, the number was less at 37,278 registering to vote. Still not a small number, but compared to the hundreds it is. But over 2,500 of those people were not in the database. Now, compare this to the week of May 18th, where just under 5,000 people registered to vote in Pennsylvania. So within 3 weeks, the number of people registering on a weekly basis jumped from 5,000 to almost 111,000. And then the total number of new registered voters in Pennsylvania within a 1-month period is almost 260,000 people. Like, did a bunch of people just suddenly move to Pennsylvania?
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of the night of the election in 2020, where all of a sudden at 2 a.m., there was a spike in all of these voter forms coming in, just at that one point in time. I mean, I don't know. I think that's a little weird.
Yeah, just a little. And let's take one more example, Arizona. So the week of June 8th, they had 45,813 people register. The week of June 1st, it was 29,185 people. The week of May 25th, it was 30,372 people. And the week of May 18th, it was 31,786 people. So that's a total of over 137,000 new voters in the state of Arizona. And when looking at the non-matches in the system, over 22,700 of those people did not have a social security number or a state ID. So again, this doesn't seem right. And it's the same trend with all the rest of the swing states. I'm just not going to bore you guys with more numbers, but you can go online and you can look at this yourselves because it is all there on the website. And I'm only talking about numbers from the past month. Imagine, go back and look at how many people have been voting or registering to vote over the past, 3 months, 6 months. These numbers are not normal.
And these are numbers that would sway the election. I mean, they make it sound like, oh, there's just a few people here and there that, will get signed up inadvertently. No, we're talking about hundreds of thousands in a 2-week time period. This is not normal. It's crazy. And speaking of Arizona, according to the New York Post, in March, a federal judge upheld the Arizona law requiring proof of citizenship on state registration forms, with federal forms only requiring a signed statement confirming U.S. citizenship to comply with the NVRA. So, like, they're upholding the law, yet it's making it super easy to break the law because all you have to do is sign a statement saying you're a citizen. You don't have to prove it. You just have to sign a form. So how many of these illegal voters are going to do that? You know, like it's just absurd. They're making it way too easy.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like we've talked about this before, but it's so clear that the Biden admin is trying to get illegal immigrants to vote. I want to play a clip from Alabama's Secretary of State Wes Allen. This is from a couple days ago, and he was talking about the Voter Registration Act and how it's enabling illegal migrants and dead people to receive voter registration information.
Deceased relative that had been passed away for 2 years received a voter registration form in the mail from one of our state agencies, and one of those agencies that are listed under the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 to serve as a voter registration agency. And so that got that, of course, raised some alarm bells, obviously, and so it got us headed down a rabbit hole with more questions, and it led to more questions. And what we found out is that anybody that comes in contact with state Medicaid that is federally funded, that is mandated by the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, so their hands are tied with this situation, is that anybody that comes in contact with that agency receives a voter registration form, no matter if they receive public benefits or not. So that means that any non-citizen, legal non-citizen, that means illegal immigrants, if they are applying for public benefits, no matter if they get the benefits or not, they are automatically sent a voter registration form. And that's why it's so vitally important that the federal government, Congress, reform the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 and then allow the states to conduct their own voter registration, take it out of the hands of the federal government. So it's through state agencies.
Okay. So the beginning part of that clip cut out. Not really. I just didn't have the fucking volume button on. But what he was saying initially was that one of their residents received voter registration for a family member who had been deceased for 2 years. And that's what opened up this whole rabbit hole that the state went down. And like, again, this is so fucking in our faces that they're trying to enable illegal migrants to vote.
Yeah, it's insane. And back to the SAVE Act, the bill would force states to take illegal migrants off of voter rolls, which would be verified through access to federal databases at the Department of Homeland Security and the Social Security Administration. And when I was reading this, Tara, I'm like, what? Like, can you fucking believe this is not already a law? It is
Right.
not a law to take illegal migrants off the voter rolls. Like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, this is something that should have been in place when voting first started. So you have Hans von Spakovsky, a former member of the Federal Election Commission and manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative over at the Heritage Foundation. And he provided testimony at a House hearing in May where he said, quote, "What I've seen over the years is federal agencies put up all kinds of red tape to make it difficult for state election officials to access their databases. This bill tries to override that too. Congress has the authority to deal with this issue." And so he pointed out that the Constitution empowers U.S. lawmakers to sort out questions about naturalization at birth or at both the state and federal level. And so this bill would also give citizens the right to bring civil lawsuits against election officials who don't have their agencies demand proof of citizenship documents. And like, to me, that sounds like we should have that right. We the people should be able to call this shit out that is blatantly wrong. But of course, this bill will likely never pass because we have a Democrat-led Senate. And as of now, if you question the election results, you're a J6er and an election denier. And which, by the way, questioning the election, that is part of our constitutional right. Like, we are allowed to do that. And yet we live in a time where if you actually do, you're censored. And in some cases, you're retaliated against by the federal government and thrown in jail. I mean, just look no further than what's happening with Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, all the January 6th people that did nothing other than go to the Capitol. I mean, there are people who are sitting in jail that didn't even go inside the building. They were just outside and they had their lives ruined, like Brandon Straka. But something that Trump keeps saying at his rallies is that we need to be too big to rig. And he said there comes a point when the numbers are so huge that you just can't rig it. Like, it would be too obvious. And according to the polls and the number of people attending his rallies and just the rhetoric online, I think it's safe to say he is too big to rig. So I'm trying to stay positive and hopeful. I think it's an uphill battle, but I do believe he has the masses on his side. And I still think they're going to replace Biden last minute. They're going to wait until it's too late for voters to have a say, and then they're going to swap him out with someone else. I mean, I would be completely shocked if that doesn't happen. But either way, I think it's going to be a landslide victory for Trump. I really do.
I still think it's going to be Newsom as the replacement. I know we've been back and forth on this, but like, that's still where my money is on Newsom.
I just can't imagine anyone is going to vote for the guy, but I guess the illegal migrants might.
Yeah. And so like, women are enamored of that fucking loser for some reason. I don't really understand why. I mean, he's got charisma. I'll give you that. He's very Obama-like and a good orator. But yeah, I still think.
And I think if they wait until the last minute where Trump can't call that person out for all of the things they've done, I think people just, if you got to make a decision, you might just vote for that person, not knowing all of the facts of who they are and what they represent and the actions they've taken. So, yeah.
And we're still waiting to hear who Trump's running mate is, right? Like, yeah. I heard earlier this week he has chosen his running mate, but hasn't announced who it is. So we'll see if that makes any difference too.
It's driving me crazy. Like, just tell us already. All right. Well, I suggest everyone go and look in your state. Like, we should start pointing this out, because I mean, when you have hundreds of thousands of people who shouldn't be registering to vote and are, we need to call it out. So,
and dead people registering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So everyone, like, do your own research, look it up, call it out, and we'll stay on top of this because I have a feeling between now and the election, the numbers are going to get even greater.
Yep.
So hopefully that opens your eyes a little bit to what's happening. But I hope everyone has a great week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you back here Friday. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.